When I was 17, my parents insisted I try and get a car. I was working towards my full license, and it made sense at the time, but I was resistant. Maybe it was out of teenage rebellion. Maybe I just didn't want to grow up. Either way, I didn't want to see a single car. And for a few months, I didn't. Then one day, there was a car for sale right next door. And at that point, I really couldn't say no because it was right there. So, me and my dad went out to look at it. It was a 2003 Ford Focus, black with a tan interior, and after taking it for a test drive or two, I had to have it. My dad spotted me the money. I don't think I ever paid him back. And after a day or two of haggling and paperwork, I had myself a car. And while it was a Ford, according to me and my family, my friends would eventually come to call it the DeLorean after one eventful ride. I remember that day well. We had all spent the night in one house, and by the time the lads had all stirred awake, snow was beginning to settle outside. And, as the majority of us were Canadian, we decided that the appropriate thing to do would be to drive to Tim Hortons for some coffee and donuts. So, we piled into the Ford. Problem was, I didn't have winter tires on, and things were starting to get slippery. Since we were on a hill, the first thing that we did was start sliding farther and farther down the road and closer to the steep bank towards the bottom. It was a bit scary, and we were all laughing, but I can't say whether or not it was free of fear. Fortunately, I managed to slow us down enough so that we didn't go careening to our deaths, but we still had a long way to go, and since we were already down the hill, I figured we might as well go the rest of the way. So we took to the highway, and as soon as we merged onto the road, I knew we were in for some trouble. Nothing had been plowed yet, and the snow was building up fast. We were skidding and sliding all over, and the best speed we could manage was about 30 kilometers an hour. I was freaking out. The lads, however, they were having a ball. With each skid of the tires and each slip on the icy pavement, there was laughter or banter or some form of insult directed right at my car. And after around 10 minutes of that, we finally made it to Tim's. We gathered around a table, donuts and coffees in hand, and did our best to heat up after the icy episode outside. The name, though, that came from the ride back. Because you see, we had turned right in order to get to the Tim's, which meant we never crossed any lanes. But on the way back, we had to turn left and clear an entire four-way intersection. And until we started to leave, I hadn't run into a single red light yet. But then, the first intersection to leave from Tim's to the house was red, and we waited. I had gained a little bit of confidence in the meantime because of our successful trip out, but it would ultimately prove to be my downfall, as the light turned green and I stepped on the gas. The Ford's wheels began to skid, then slide, and we began to move forward at a crawl, swerving back and forth while the hood began to push toward the center of the intersection. I let off the gas right when we pulled into the middle of all 16 lanes, and I looked up to notice that the light had just turned yellow. The lads and I began to flip out, and we were all laughing still, but not nearly as confidently as we had been before. The reason being, there were semi-trucks waiting on two sides of the highway with chains on their tires, and the drivers must have looked at me like I was insane. I let the wheels stop, let the car stop, and very slowly began to press on the gas again. Then, as the light turned red on our side, and green for the semi-trucks, my friend Corey screamed the iconic line, "Get this heap of scrap to 88 miles an hour and let's get the hell out of here." And as he said it, I pressed harder on the gas. The tires spun until they caught on the crunched up snow, and we jerked our way back into the passing lane just as the semi-trucks began to roar past us. The cab erupted into joy as the lads were all laughing or letting out sighs of relief, and they hurled insults at the Ford, now known as the DeLorean, for the rest of the way home. It might have been scary at the time, sure, but looking back, I had fun. as I'm sure the rest of the guys did too. Memories are kind of funny that way. I took that car everywhere. We went to Seattle for my first ever concert. We went to Moonlight Hilltops for deep talks with friends and more than friends. And we went to more gas stations and shops than I can count. But most important of all, we always went together. There is a special and undefinable bond a driver gets to make with their vehicle. Together, you two encounter every bump, every turn, every close call, and all the peculiar little things that happen on the road. And by the time you need to make some repairs or give it a good clean, it feels more like helping out a close friend rather than a chore. I used to always make fun of those guys who clean their car every morning. But while I hardly clean the Focus myself, I began to understand what made people do things like that. I ended up selling the car about a year ago, since it wasn't being as used as it was before, and I didn't have too much reason to keep it while there were other people out there who had yet to experience that same bond. And I felt a little upset that the car wouldn't be mine, but I was ultimately happy, as I had a feeling the people who bought it would enjoy it just as much as I did. And maybe, someday, when they're done with it, they'll give it to somebody else too, and pass on that love to another generation. I think that's what makes humans so cool. Ordinary items like cars and houses can grow to form some of the most important bonds you'll ever have. I suppose it is a form of love, isn't it? You come to appreciate how much your wheels have done for you, and after all those years together, when it comes time to sell or scrap the thing, you almost feel kind of sad. All of those little memories soaked into the seats are washed away as you deep clean the seats for a new driver. And with each little detail taken out, the bond begins to fade into the past.